Hello, and welcome back to my series on different art projects that you can try out in Adobe Fresco to up your artistic exploration and potentially dig yourself out of a creative rut. Today's project is pretty simple, but you can take it in like so many different directions. We'll be exploring the idea of creating a series of works to push your artistic skills. I'll be making 5 different animal portraits in Adobe Fresco using limited brushes and a super limited color palette. And I will also briefly cover some of the simple tools in Fresco to help you get started. And then I'll show you how I completed my series. So, very easy setup for this. You're gonna pick 5 different images of animals' faces. You can choose randomly, and that's what I did, or you can select animals that you like, or animals that kind of go together in a theme. So big cats, dog breeds, animals of the Amazon, reptiles, whatever you're feeling excited about drawing, right? So if you're gonna do random animals, what I did was I just Googled random animal generator, and the top on Google is this link, and you can kind of just, I don't know anything about this website or if it's suspect or whatever, but yeah, you can choose, these different options here and then click rerun. From there, I just kind of would go and say, rabbit face photo. And, nowadays, more than ever, you got to watch out for these AI generated ones. But for the most part, it should be pretty easy to find one that you like. And then from there, once you have your images selected, we can get started on making stuff. So the next thing you're gonna do is pick a super limited color palette. And by limited color palette, I mean like black and white and one other color. I chose red because that was just what I was feeling in that moment. But I would suggest a color that's like a pop color, right? Because black is going to be where all your contrast comes from, right? That's what you're gonna do the majority of it in. And then the pop of color is kind of more to suggest form or shadow, shape, stuff like that. So the color is not as important, but the pop of color is what's gonna link all of them together and make them all look cohesive. Also, for our brushes, we're gonna choose super limited brushes. I used 2 or 3. I think I used the pencil, some sort of inking brush, and then just like a flat wash coloring brush. Another important thing and a big part of this is to kind of set yourself a rough guideline for how long you're going to spend on each one. I spent about 2 or 3 hours, I think, on each one, which is kind of a lot. It's a lot of time, and I probably should have not taken as much time on them and pushed myself to do them a little faster. But the core purpose of this is to finish, right? So for whatever that is for you, I'm not saying set a timer, because I know that if I have like a countdown behind me while I'm drawing, it's kind of stressful and frustrating and doesn't really feel good. So I would just kind of give yourself a rough guideline. The main thing is that you need to finish, because at the end we want to have 5 finished things that are done, not works in progress or kind of like just kind of a mess, right? It's more of like, okay, these are 5 finished drawings that I have in a series, and it's done, and I made the decisions and it's done. And there's something to be said about just finishing something. And don't feel like you have to post these or, frame them, put them on your wall. It's more of like for your own confidence, if that makes sense, to create something, finish it, and move on. So no stress or pressure to do anything with these. It is an artistic exercise, but I think the key purpose of it is to have something that's completed so that you can move on. Let's jump right into my first example. All right, so the first step is opening up Fresco and creating your document. Mine is 1080 by 1440, and I just had the DPI at 72 because this is just an exercise. So you're gonna paste in your reference image by clicking on those three dots there and clicking paste from clipboard. I'm just gonna move mine over to the left there to use as a reference. All right, so the next thing, I just personally put in my color palette in there. You don't really have to do that because for the sake of this, I'm only going to be using 3 colors from here anyway. So when I say black and white, I don't necessarily mean, you know, whitest white and darkest black. For this, I'm actually using sort of an off-white that I have because I just feel like it makes it look more paper-like. And then for the black, I'm using, it's kind of like, it's like a purple, but I like made it really dark. So it is black, but it kind of has a little more uniqueness to it. So the first thing that I do is just kind of sketch out the rough outlines here, sort of like getting just being loose and trying to get the general shapes down. So for this, I'm using just the standard default pencil that's available in Adobe Fresco. And I'm just being really loose and trying to get the general shapes down. Alright, so I kind of like, part of my sketching process in Fresco is I'll usually flip the canvas, as you can see me do right here. And then I like to go into the free transform and then the liquify tools. And I start to just morph my sketch because it's really early at this stage, just trying to get it to look a little more like how I want it. You know, we're using a digital platform. We have the ability to use our digital tools at our disposal. So I guess I like that. I'm going to be honest, this drawing really was hard for me because it was actually, even though it's the first example, it was the last drawing that I made in this series. So I was really questioning a lot of things, getting a little bit in my head about like perfectionism and stuff. You know, I kept just getting really bogged down in some of these details here. And this is sped up a lot. This is sped up like 600% or something. And yeah, I was just kind of struggling because he was looking real crazy to me. And here you can see I'm like moving it around. I'm using the lasso tool to kind of stretch things. Oh, I'm just stretching the crap out of this. I'm trying to test my proportions, see what's going on. I even did like a sketch on top to try to refine it, which I usually never do. But yeah, I was just kind of struggling with this bear drawing for some reason. I realized I've never really drawn a bear before, and much less a polar bear. You know, anything that you draw that has white fur is just going to be a challenge because you want it to still appear white, but to also still have texture and still show like the fur and stuff like that. So yeah, I think later in this, I even go so far as to like trace the actual picture so that I'm like, because I just felt like I've been looking at it for way too long. So here I start, you know, refining some of these details. Drawing the mouth. Trying to draw some of this fur on his chest. Fur is one of those things that can be challenging because it's kind of tempting to draw each individual little fur like strand, right? I know a lot of people when they first start drawing human portraits, at least, there's a tendency to be like, oh my gosh, hair is so overwhelming because I feel like I have to draw each individual strand. And sometimes drawing fur can help break you out of that because ultimately you're trying to suggest the appearance of fur rather than drawing it photorealistically, at least for the purposes of what you're doing right here. So I think that it's starting to kind of come together. It still looks really muddy to me. Here you can see I keep zooming out because I'm trying to see more objectively of what it is that I'm doing. Sometimes when you zoom out or you squint your eyes or something and you see it sort of more blurry or at a smaller scale, it can help you identify things that aren't working. Here I go back in with the liquify because I was just getting stressed out. I was like, why doesn't this look like the picture? See, I start just getting way too detail oriented with this, and it's supposed to be more of like an artistic exercise. Whatever. I'm learning here. Never drawn a polar bear before in my life. I'm moving the eyes around a little bit because it feels like maybe that's what's visually what's wrong. It's just hard, especially like I'm trying to draw the shape of the muzzle and I'm trying to draw the shapes in the nose, but when you're drawing something that's white, it's not exactly like, if you draw the outline, it doesn't really look right because all of the form is suggested by shading and by slight variations in different colors of white. Yeah, so I'm just still fiddling around with this a lot. He's starting to look like a koala to me, or like a wombat. Yeah, I was getting really frustrated with this. Alright. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this is one of those where, like, I kind of get bogged down in the details and keep moving around these really detailed portions rather than just getting it right from the start. I don't know. Yeah, here's a part where I just literally started, I was like so frustrated. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what am I not seeing with my eye? So I just do a really simple tracing over the top. This is just to check my work, right? So that's the tracing. And I actually do this thing where I lock the pixels and then I color over it with reds just so I can like see for myself what am I doing wrong here. And then I just use the liquify to shape the sketch into the tracing just because I was getting really frustrated at this. And I feel like, yeah, I am using a lot of little digital cheat codes basically to make this sketch how I want it. But I feel like it's fine because I'm more so just using it to check my work, and this is more of an artistic practice exercise. So here I'm actually doing something really cool that I've never done before, and I'm using the symmetry tool in Adobe Fresco and messing around with that to kind of create like this cool sun design at the top. If you guys want me to do more of a deeper dive into all the cool things that you can do with the symmetry tool, let me know and I will definitely make that. I have been thinking about making a video on that because there's like some cool exercises that I thought of that would be really fun using the symmetry tool. So now it's finally time to get into the actual inking sort of process for this. And for this, I'm using a brush that is like a default brush in Adobe Fresco called Vintage Inks. And I really like it because it's just like kind of a simple sharp inker brush, but it has like a little texture to it. It's got a little fun vibe going on there. So I'm using my darkest shade of my 3-color palette, which is basically black. And I am trying to not exactly do just like outlines. I'm more so trying to use the black to sort of show that hard shading, and then I'm also using some sort of like cross hatching a little bit here and there, and I'm just focusing on the areas that are black. And because I have spent all that time on the sketch phase, I don't need to sit here with my ink and be like, oh no, this actually isn't proportional to how I want it. Oh no. I can spend that whole time while I'm inking just worrying about the sort of dark ink sort of part of the drawing. I'm not going back, doing more pencil work, and then going and doing my ink. So really trying to refine all the spots on here that are just really the darkest parts first. So the nose, the lips, the eyes, the ears, and then I go in and add my little, indications of fur. And here I'm just messing with the layer opacity, setting it a little lower. I don't know, I just couldn't get over the freaky eyes. I don't know why, like, the eyes just kept, like, bothering me. And overall, I mean, I feel like this one came out pretty cool at the end, but definitely, I don't know, for some reason it's just not my favorite. I feel like I was too precious, sort of with my line making. I was, like, overthinking it a lot. I feel like this one took me a really long time. And that, I feel like, tends to happen when you're doing a series and you're at the last part of that series. It can just be so, like, so easy to be like, okay, this is the last one. It's got to be perfect, right? I don't know. That's why I feel like working in a series is just really good for your artistic development, because you go through a lot of phases, right? Like, and in the monster grid, video that I did before, it was kind of like the same vibe. Like, the first idea, the first iteration of what you do may be kind of bad. It may be frustrating and not come out like how you want it. And then the one in the middle can sort of like hit this sweet spot where you're like, wow, like, I'm still exploring, but I'm loose. I'm, not perfectionistic with it, right? Basically what I'm saying is, when you're working in a series, each one is kind of its own experience and has its own challenges, and you're not necessarily trying to force everything to be really, really similar, but you go through a lot of different creative things by pushing yourself into a little box. So I think what I'm gonna start doing next here is start adding color. So I hide that sketch layer and I grab it's the flat dry brush in Fresco. And I like that one because it's, I don't know, I'm familiar with it. So if you want to use a different coloring technique, go for it. I would just suggest sticking to like only a couple different brushes for it. So it's cool too, since, in Fresco you can double tap that button at the bottom there to make your brush into an eraser version of that brush. Something else I wanted to point out is that I'm also using the pencil tool from before to add some color, and I'm kind of adding some like cross hatching and stuff with the pencil tool, with the red itself. The pencil tool is cool too because you can do like the side of the pencil too. Anyway, after I add my color, I have another layer on top where I'm adding sort of like using that black color that we had before. I'm using the pencil tool again to softly add some additional shading. Later I'll show you, I did end up going in and adding way more red to this because I felt like it just didn't really go well with the other ones in the series. So here you can see I'm like really trying to get some shading, stick with the color palette, and use my 3 brushes that are at my disposal to create some fun texture and some different things going on. Alright, so then I make a layer on top and I take my white, and that's when I can add those highlights. And I love this part. I love doing the highlights at the end because it makes the eyes actually like come alive a little bit more. I also go in with the 3 different tools that I have. So I'll use like that vintage inks brush to do the really sharp white details. And I add some like additional, highlights on the fur textures to break it up a little bit more. I also use that white pencil to do some more softer lines as well. Really just kind of exploring, experimenting. That's kind of the purpose of this series. But yeah, since this was the last one that I drew, it was like, I was just like, okay, I'm ready. I'm done. I'm ready to be done with this. So the next thing I do, I take that vintage inks brush, and this is something that I think is fun. You don't have to do it this exact way, but I just like scribble in this flat sort of black background around it. I mean, easily I could use, the paint bucket tool or the lasso tool and then the paint bucket, something like that to do this, but I feel like sketching in the background, like even though it takes longer, I just feel like it gives the work more life. It gives it more of a hand-drawn look, and I just like how it came out. And I ended up choosing to do these cool, like, sort of celestial symbols sort of thing for the backgrounds, so they weren't so plain. You can do whatever you want. I would just keep it like kind of consistent thematically throughout the different portraits that you do. So each one I'll go into after this one is done, but I kind of wanted to have sort of a jagged, graphic, grungy sort of look. So I kind of make like a little white outline around the whole animal. I use my, the eraser form of that vintage inks brush to refine the edges where it needs to be. And yeah, that's pretty much the process of this. It's pretty darn simple. And yeah, we're basically done here. I think I also show after this. Oh yeah, I added some detail to this. I'm not sure if I'm totally a huge fan of how this part came out, but whatever. That's the beauty of working in a series, is that the series stands stronger than just the individual piece of art by itself. And I feel, pretty proud of myself. I've never drawn a polar bear before. Alright, so then I'm going to show you after kind of the fresco time lapse that shows like me adding the rest of the red, because I just needed it to like have more visual pop. Alright, so our polar bear is done. And now I can show you the other drawings in the series. So this was actually the first one that I did. And yeah, Toad. I randomly got Toad, and I was like, well, I never really drawn a frog like this before, or a toad like this before. So it was definitely fun because, their eyes are very distinct and very dissimilar to humans' eyes, so it really forced me to get out of my comfort zone. Yeah, this background, I initially was trying to do some sort of grassy background, but I ended up figuring out the celestial kind of theme. This is a jackal, which I'm obviously never drawn a jackal before. It kind of looks like a fox to me, and the finished drawing looks like a fox. I don't really know what specifically would make something jackal-like, if you weren't already aware that it was a jackal. Anyway, this one was really fun because I love the eyes, and the ears are just like so gigantic, and this animal just looks so sassy. I had a lot of fun with the cross hatching on the fur on this one. I might have gone a little too crazy, but yeah, it's really satisfying to watch me draw those ears. I don't know why, I was just like in the zone with this one. So fierce. So ferocious. And this one, the color palette was made for this drawing specifically. It seems like was not the intention, but it just worked out that way. I loved adding the highlights on this one. It just came out so fancy. And then I just did like a little moon symbol above his head. Very fun. Okay, this one, the donkey. I'm not, a horse aficionado. I don't really draw horses or things that are similar to horses. So when I drew this, it was definitely different because I don't know, they have like so much musculature like underneath their skin. They just have such a specific proportion that like if it's off, you just notice it immediately. But yeah, I've never drawn a donkey before, and I really like how this came out. It just looks so cool in this like crosshatchy style, and I really like how this one came out. It's probably my favorite one. And I actually, when doing this, I realized like these animals that I picked kind of ended up being animals like folklore animals, if that makes sense. Like you read those stories as a kid, of like different fables and folklore and stuff. I feel like that was kind of a common thread between all the different animals. And then I ended up doing this rabbit or hare or whatever. And I was just obsessed with how crazy he looks. His gigantic ears and his like crazy eye. So I kind of got the idea of sort of like a Mad Hatter kind of vibe, like Alice in Wonderland with these like swirls, like he's crazy. And with this one, I really was not precious with my lines. I was like, you know what, I just gotta get it done. I gotta get this one done. And I actually really like how it came out. Very like loose, not overdone, not underdone. Maybe a little overdone. I don't know. Kind of reminds me of like Bunnicula, if you guys remember that, with these red eyes that I give him later. I really like how it came out though. It's like a horror kind of style illustration almost. Especially when I add in the black background, it's like very dark and twisted. Welcome to my sick and twisted mind. Alright, so with that last one done, here are all the finished ones together. And I think they look really cool. I'm really excited about having actually finished something for once. Usually I just have a sketchbook with just disjointed random things in it. And it was really satisfying to actually finish these and have them be sort of a completed set. So I think this is a fun project. I feel like if you chose a different color, a different kind of vibe, a different theme of animals to choose from, you could get some really cool effects, you know? So let me know in the comments, okay, which one you think is the most successful and which one is the least successful and why, because I would love to hear your opinions. And if you end up doing this project yourself, I think it would be really fun if you would post them or even just like private message me. Let me see what you're doing, because even if this video inspires just one person to be creative, then it's totally worth it, because being creative is the lifeblood of an artist. It is so much fun, and let's bring fun back to art. Oh, something else. I put these up on my Redbubble just like for fun. They're pretty small. They're only, like I said, 1080 by 1440. So they're pretty small, and so they only really work for like the stickers or magnets and little postcards and stuff. But if you wanted to do these for the purpose of like having finished things that you could like print out as posters or whatever, I would highly recommend, looking up the dimensions of what poster you want to make and then doing that from the beginning, because you can always make something smaller. You can never make it bigger unless it's a vector graphic, but these are like rasterized drawings. So yeah, just something fun. I know like I probably won't get like crazy sales or whatever on Redbubble, but it's just kind of fun for me to just put them up there and see what they could look like. This kind of idea is pretty simple. Like it's nothing groundbreaking. You could also do this with people, and that's something that I have done before. Like I'll go onto, something where people are posting pictures of themselves and I'll just draw them for free. I remember there used to be an app that I would use all the time, like 4 or 5 years ago maybe. But anyway, if you do this project with people's faces, it's kind of like hard to finish the drawings, in my opinion, because you either spend way too much time trying to get the likeness of the person and trying to make it look just like them, because as people, we have, organs in our brains that make it so that we're constantly like, we have the best eye for likeness, right, of other human beings. We know when we look at a person and we look at a drawing that, oh my gosh, that drawing is crazy. That does not look anything like them. So it creates kind of a thing where if you're drawing people, it's just harder to explore and mess around. Like, if you're comfortable with that, go for it. I've done it before, but it's also a thing where at the end, you have 5 portraits of just random people, and it kind of doesn't help it be cohesive into a series, if that makes any sense. It's harder to make 5 portraits of just random people you don't know go together. Maybe if you did 5 portraits of people who, you did all the members of One Direction, right? Then that would be cohesive series, right? Something like that. But I'm choosing to do animals, number one, because it breaks me out of my comfort zone, because I don't draw animals as much, especially certain kinds of animals like horses and stuff. I don't really draw them very often. And also it's to, focus more on the art of like drawing, focus more on the actual, you know, physical thing that you're doing rather than trying to learn facial anatomy and capture likeness, right? It's more about making a piece of artwork that has an animal in it, right? Than it is about a facial drawing exercise. I hope that makes sense.
Anyway, I'm going to end this because I'm just rambling at this point. But thank you for watching. If you made it this far, give this video a like or whatever you feel like doing. But yeah, I'm going to be making another one in this series hopefully soon. So stay tuned for more.